From Mars, when we look back at Earth through the lenses of our observatories, we still see the scars, not only the burns of fire and the oceans turned to vapor, but the craters, the poisoned soils, the skeletal remains of cities once magnificent. And these are not only the wounds of climate and neglect, they are the wounds of war. Because before Earth became the burning ball you heard about the last episode, before half of humanity was abandoned and the other half fled into this cage of domes and machines, there were the wars, and they were the second great regret. Wars that did not begin in the final century, but were centuries in the making. Wars that began when nations first chose conquest over compassion, when empires of the 1800s marched across continents not to share knowledge, but to extract and enslave, when factories roared in Europe and America, fueled by coal and blood taken from colonies, when borders were redrawn with knives across maps, creating divisions that bled for centuries, and even then, humanity was warned. Every empire built on war collapses into dust, but we did not listen. Instead, we carried those divisions forward into the 1900s, where the First World War ripped nations apart with machines of death, machine guns, gas, tanks, and left an entire generation buried in mud. And when the world vowed never again, we prepared for worse. And worse came, the Second World War, cities burned by bombs, millions slaughtered in camps, and humanity revealed its darkest capacity to mechanize death at a scale unimagined before. The nuclear fire over Hiroshima and Nagasaki should have been our final warning, the proof that in seeking to destroy one another, we had found the means to destroy ourselves. But instead of abandoning these weapons, we multiplied them, stockpiled them, threatened each other with them, and so the Cold War carved half the planet into two camps, glaring across walls of ideology. Even in peace, war never left us. It became the background hum of the 20th century. Proxy wars, invasions, coups, revolutions, endless blood, spilled in the name of oil, power, religion, pride. And every time we might have chosen cooperation, we chose division. When the 21st century dawned, the warnings became louder, but the wars continued. Terror shook cities, armies invaded deserts, drones stalked the skies, and still leaders pointed fingers at enemies instead of looking in the mirror. Then came climate collapse, and the wars grew sharper, more desperate, more intimate. Because when rivers dried and fields failed, when storms drowned coasts and fires consumed forests, nations did not say, "Let us share." They said, "Let us defend what is ours." And water became a weapon. Food became a fortress. Borders became slaughterhouses. Picture the 2050s, the Mekong reduced to a thread, armies stationed at every crossing. In Africa, drought turned farmland to wasteland, and militias seized the last wells. In the Americas, wildfires consumed harvests, and cities erupted in riots for grain. In Europe, millions of climate refugees pressed against razor wire borders, only to be gunned down in the name of sovereignty. War had evolved, no longer fought on faraway battlefields, but on every street, in every market, in every refugee camp. And yet even then, leaders lied. They told their people the enemy was not greed, not corruption, not negligence, but neighbors, immigrants, outsiders, the powerless, and so hatred spread faster than hunger. By the late 21st century, nuclear fire returned, not as global war, but as desperate last strikes by collapsing regimes, leaving craters still glowing in 2300. Bioweapons leaked from failing labs, plague swept through starving camps, drones once built for delivery became hunters, circling overhead like vultures, waiting for the last breath. And I must ask you, how long can a species fight itself before it forgets it is one species? That is what happened to us. War became the default, cooperation the exception. Even as oceans boiled and skies turned black, we killed one another for water, for bread, for light. And by doing so, we quickened the collapse. When the Exodus finally began, when fleets lifted the fortunate into the skies, Earth was already broken not only by fire, but by the memory of war, by the poison of division, by the knowledge that when survival demanded unity, we chose instead to sharpen our knives. That is the second regret, the wars of the dying Earth, and their consequences visible even now. Earth, a half-dead, half-burning ball, silence echoing where cities once stood, and Mars filled with survivors who cannot forget what they did to one another. But war was not the final betrayal, because war kills bodies. But what came next killed souls. What came next was the lottery, the auction of survival itself, when tickets off Earth were sold not to the worthy, but to the wealthy, when children were torn from parents at gates, when humanity's future was written not in compassion, but in coins. And that story I will tell you tomorrow. Until then, remember, every bullet fired was a seed of regret. Every division chosen was a fracture in the foundation of our future. And if you ignore this warning, if you let yourselves repeat our path, then one day your own children may ask, as ours do here on Mars, why did they fight each other when they had only one home? Do not give them the same silence we live with. Subscribe, follow, keep your notifications alive, because the story of the lottery will reveal just how deep our betrayal of humanity truly went.